Okay, everybody, I'm introducing myself tonight. Welcome, everybody. My name's Richard Dennis. I'm the director of the Australia Institute, and welcome to Politics in the Pub. And as I said, tonight I'm introducing my good self. So grab a seat, bring a beer, and we'll talk about does Australia ride on the miner's back? That's left. Could have put that film. Okay, thanks everyone for coming along. I don't know if anyone heard, but I had an interesting day yesterday. I've changed my views. I no longer am concerned about climate change because Lord Monkton did his magic on me. But thanks to all the people who emailed and encouraged me. It was an interesting time, which maybe someone wants to ask about afterwards. But tonight I'm here to talk about some research that the Institute will be publishing soon, and I have to acknowledge Dave, who's on his feet, which is good. So Dave Richardson's done most of the research on which my talk tonight is based, and it's fascinating. And when it comes out, I think it will start, hopefully, quite a shift in our public debate around these issues. Because, frankly, I guess the premise of the paper is: does Australia ride on the miner's back? To what extent does this mining boom that we hear so much about, to what extent is that really driving the Australian economy? To what extent are we all benefiting from that? And perhaps most importantly, is it really, are we actually benefiting from it, or are we missing out? So let me just start, because I'm a bit worried about heckling tonight. Put up your hand here if you work in the mining industry. Well, look around, because that's about representative of the Australian economy. Because I don't think we've got 100 people here tonight. I'd say we've got about 80. And in any 100 people, or in any 100 people in Australia, or sorry, only 100 people in the Australian labour market, only 1.8 of that 100 people would work in the mining industry. 1.8% of Australians are employed in the mining industry. Put another way, 98.2% of Australians are not employed in the mining industry. So I know we're supposed to be out of touch here in Canberra, but when it comes to being representative of the Australian economy, we're not too bad on mining, because it's, mining employment at least, because it's a trivial percentage of the Australian labour market, and I'd suggest it's near zero here in Australia. Though there's a bit of a quarry up on the way out of town.
Mitch Hook works here.
Mitch Hook works here, good point. I'm sure. Hey, how does that work, Dave? Do the lobbyists get counted in the mining stats?
Services to mining.
Services to mining. And that 200, so basically there's 200,000 people, 205,000 people work in the mining industry in Australia. And that 205,000 people includes around 50,000 people working in coal mining. And every other kind of mining you can think of, including quarrying, etc., etc. So that 205,000 number, including services to mining, is quite broad. Now, we all know that the manufacturing industry in Australia is on its knees. It's a basket case, and it doesn't employ anyone anymore, except it employs around 4 times as many people as the mining industry does. The manufacturing industry in Australia is still a big employer. Pop quiz for anyone but Dave. What's the biggest employer in the Australian economy these days? Services is too broad. I'm not giving you that one. You got to tell me what service.
Retail.
Education.
No.
Dave, break their little hearts.
Health and allied services.
Okay, they're the big employers. Okay, and the biggest industry in Australia. It's the biggest. Sorry to play pop quiz with you, but I'll tell you why I'm doing the pop quiz in a minute. No. Biggest industry in Australia. Percentage of GDP. No. Dave, I'll put you on the spot again. Finance. The banks. And the super funds. So there's the Australian economy for us. Okay, mining, and by the way, mining is big. Mining is about 9.2% of GDP, and that's up from about 4.5% before the current mining boom. Now, what do we mean by the mining boom? The mining boom that we're referring to refers to the incredible increase in prices for commodities that Australian exporters have experienced in recent years. Coal prices, iron ore prices, gold prices have literally sort of done the Al Gore hockey stick. They've just gone off in this exponential growth, going up 300-400% between 2004 and today. Huge increases in prices. It's very important to understand the difference. What we're experiencing is a price boom in the Australian mining industry. There isn't actually much of a boom in output. And by that I mean output of the mining industry has actually only increased by about 27% in 7 years. Now, over compounding, that's really just growing a bit faster than the economy overall. Now, that's to some extent unfair to the mining industry because a lot of the mining activity is in building new mines that aren't yet generating any output. But to the extent that the Australian economy and our exports are experiencing this huge boom at the moment, the boom is all in the price. Okay, we're digging up more stuff than we used to, but we're getting paid sometimes 3 or 4 times as much for that stuff as we were getting paid only 7 years ago. Now, that raises what are very important but almost never discussed questions. And once upon a time, these are the questions that economists were obsessed about distribution. The price of gold, the price of coal, the price of iron ore has gone through the roof. Money is literally falling from the sky. Not literally, that's not true at all. Money is metaphorically falling from the sky. Haven't seen the money literally falling from the sky. The word literally has kind of changed its meaning, hasn't it? Huge volume of additional revenue flowing into the mining industry, but into whose pockets? Literally into whose pockets? It doesn't employ many people. Hold that thought. 1.8% of people working in mining. So it can't really be going into workers' pockets because there aren't that many of them. Yes, they're well paid, much better paid than average workers in the Australian economy, but not that well paid. The costs of production are going up because we're digging deeper holes. Higher prices encourage us to pursue more and more marginal mines. So the costs of production are going up, but that's in new mines. The cost of production in old mines hasn't really changed much at all. That is, if you were running a coal mine or you're running an iron ore mine in 2004 and you were profitable at 2004's world prices, well, when the world price trebles, your costs don't really change. Your revenues go through the roof and you might have to pay a bit more for the small number of people you employ, but most of your costs, the capital costs in building your mine, you'd already paid them. So again, price goes up 300-400% depending on your commodity. Costs don't really change, don't employ many workers. Where must the profits be going? Well, where must the money be going? It's going into the profits. So we're experiencing a price boom, we're experiencing a profit boom, and of course it's in that context that Ken Henry suggested that we needed to introduce a mining tax. Now, the mining tax that was proposed by Ken Henry was comprehensive. It was a mining tax that addressed virtually all extractive industries, and it was designed in such a way, it was sort of like a progressive tax system for mining. The more profitable your mine was, the higher the rate of tax you paid. The less profitable your mine was, the less tax you paid. So the tax was designed specifically to collect lots of revenue from those mines that were previously profitable at $300 or $400 a tonne, or say with gold $300 or $400 an ounce, and are now making outrageously high profits with gold approaching $1,400 an ounce. So the purpose of the Henry proposal of the mining tax was quite specific. It was to say there are some mines out there that are just making extraordinary profits. We want to take a lot of tax from them. There are some other mines that are marginal. We don't want to take as much from them. But of course, I'll talk a bit more about how it works in a second. But of course, that tax proposal was defeated around the time that Kevin Rudd was defeated, and we now have a new tax going forward. The thing that you have to understand about mining tax, why it's entirely different to all other kinds of tax, is that mining is this unique industry that doesn't pay for its raw materials. So if you want to sell beer in a pub, you buy beer from a brewer, and you sell beer to customers, and your profit is the difference between those two things. If you want to make cars, you buy steel, you employ labour, you buy machines, you put them all together. But of course, when it comes to coal mining or iron ore extraction or gold extraction, we don't. The companies don't actually pay for the product that they in turn sell to someone else, except through what we call royalties, which are a form of tax on which acts as a price for those raw materials. And those royalties are low, very low, and they haven't in any way increased in the way that the raw materials have increased. So compare the way that Australia and, say, Saudi Arabia respond to a change in world energy prices. Everyone knows that the Saudi Arabians get rich when the price of oil goes up, but in Australia we've actually set up systems, we've actually allocated our resources and taxed resources in such a way that it's not Australia that gets rich when Australia's resources go through the roof. It's the companies that happen to currently have the rights to pull them out of the ground. So even though they never actually purchased the coal under the ground, even though they never actually purchased the iron ore under the ground, they never actually paid up front and said, I own that now, so if there's a windfall gain, I'd own that. In addition to the fact that they never paid anything for it up front, we have these very modest royalties, which as they pull the resources out of the ground, we expect them, or we ask them to pay for it. So the benefits of the mining boom have disproportionately gone to those who own the mines in terms of profits. And the fun part is, of course, and Naomi Edwards would rely on for this number, estimates that 83% of the mining industry is now foreign owned. 83% of the mining industry is foreign owned. So we're in the middle of this boom. The revenues, the price that the world is willing to pay goes through the roof. The cost of production don't change very much. The profits go through the roof, and 83% of those profits are actually repatriated to the foreign owners of the resource. Now, Ken Henry proposed the RSPT, the Resource Super Profits Tax, and after a $20 million advertising campaign around the time that Kevin Rudd lost office. I think he lost office for reasons other than that, but you certainly can't separate the two completely. Julia Gillard negotiated a new deal with the miners called the MRRT, the Mining Resource Rent Tax. And the Mining Resource Rent Tax only applies to coal and iron ore, doesn't cover gold, doesn't cover nickel, doesn't cover anything else. And the rate of tax is lower, and it doesn't have that wonderful progressive tax feature that the other one has. Now, the consequence of that $20 million advertising campaign is that the mining companies in the next 10 years, as a result of spending